TSMC and Samsung, the world's two leading foundries, have entered a new phase in advanced 3-nanometer chip making. Amidst fierce global competition, we will explore how Taiwan is responding to global increasing demand for semiconductors amid record inflation and rising geopolitical risk. We'll take deep dive into Taiwan's chip industry and discuss whether 2023 could be the year TSMC surpasses Samsung in profitability. Hi and welcome to Taiwan Talks, covering the latest global news analysis from a Taiwan perspective. I am Catherine Liu.
I'm Rath Wang. Joining us in the studio today is Konrad Young, former TSMC R&D Director, LeadAgileX Accelerating Founding Partner, and National Zhengzhi University International MBA Adjunct Professor, and Marco Mezger, Executive Vice President and COO of Neumonda and President of MEMPHIS Electronic. Both are experts on Taiwan's chip industry. I spoke earlier to Karl Breidenbach, global leader of the Semiconductor Procurement Practice at Boston Consulting Group. And I also spoke earlier to Colley Hwang, president and founder of DIGITIMES, one of the world's most trusted sources on semiconductor and technology supply chains out of Taiwan. Apart from TSMC's new Arizona plant, TSMC is mass producing and expanding its 3-nanometer manufacturing capabilities with a new facility in Tainan, in Taiwan, that just opened at the end of 2022. TSMC Chair Mark Liu mentioned that this is a testament to Taiwan's next phase in developing advanced chips. My first question goes to you, Konrad. With such ambitious plans, how is Taiwan going to further contribute to the global growth and innovation and further integrate in the global tech supply chain?
Well, I think TSMC become the giant, the leader of a foundry for the chip supply, working with all the fabulous company. So expansion of the facility, expansion of capacity to make chips is what TSMC has been doing for more than 20, 30 years. So if it meet all the customers' need for global customer, so I think TSMC will continue to expand their facility and their capacity to the need of everybody, especially the fabulous company.
As your former leader of their R&D practice, do you feel that there's actually more or new innovative products that TSMC has to offer?
Well, I think TSMC is a benefit from the Moore's law, continues with nanometer shrinkage, and then until the end of Moore's law, I think TSMC will still doing this based on the innovation within the Moore's law. Okay, it's very hard to predict after Moore's law.
And if you could talk a bit about Moore's law for our international audience.
Okay. Moore's law is an idea coming from Gordon Moore of Intel founder, which basically shrink the size of chips and then increase the density and increase the power and the performance, and as well as try to reduce the power. So it is a law of every 2 years increase the density by a factor of 2.
Is that a fixed time, 2 years?
It's actually changing as time goes. It goes originally 2 years, and then it could shrink to a little bit shorter. But right now, after 3 nanometer, it could last a little bit longer, could be 2 or 3 years. So longer the time, it create an issue for the people have been used to every 2 years. So if it take longer, then you might have certain impact of how customer prepare their product, okay? Because every 2 years, people expecting new things come out, and every half year, every 1 year, it has a middle point of making a new technology.
So is 2023 the start of the new cycle?
2023 is about the time for 3 nanometer or 4 nanometer. Yeah.
What does this time frame means for semiconductor industry competition between, Taiwan, Korea, Japan, even?
Actually, this the so-called years, the duration of Moore's law from generation to generation, kind of guide everybody in this industry. into the same timing. Okay, it is a tempo setting law. Okay, of course, Moore's law implies many other things: economical law, technology law. But these 2 years, so-called roughly every generation, is sort of set everybody in this industry from their product to decide what technology they will use during this particular time.
Do you feel it's the same, Marco, with the European chip industry and other places in the world?
Yeah, I think it's a different animal, let's put it in this way. The European chip industry, comparing to TSMC, it's not really apple to apple, right? So we are talking TSMC, like cutting edge technology. Konrad mentioned it's the year of the 3 or 4 nanometer. There's no German or European chip manufacturer who is able to produce it in this way, right? So I think the whole area of the high performance computing, the CPUs, the Apples for the iPhones, I mean, this is mainly driven by CPUs which go in data center, high performance computing, and smartphones. So these are normally the ones which drive this revenue, and where TSMC is the world leader, right? I mean, they have almost 60% market share in the foundry business, and it's a pure play foundry. This is also very important to understand. This means the only thing what TSMC is doing, they produce for companies who design chips. They don't have own products where the chips are basically built in, like, for example, Samsung, like, for example, Intel and others. So they only offer the service like a contract manufacturing services.
Now I understand the role that TSMC is playing right now, but there's been a lot of prediction, it's a new year, between TSMC and Samsung. You're the industry expert. What kind of advantage that TSMC has over Samsung? And do you predict that this year that TSMC will surpass Samsung in its profitability?
So I think if you look at Samsung, we really need to distinguish a little bit, because you know, you have different segments. You have the consumer electronics business. We know all the Samsung Galaxy phones. We know home appliances. I mean, Samsung is a conglomerate, right? So basically, they have different segments. There's no question that the semiconductor segment is normally contributing in good years the biggest amount of the profitability. But in bad years, the balance sheet is hurt pretty badly. So as you probably heard in the news, if you look at the semiconductor industry, there has been like a significant drop in certain segments, and the biggest drop has been in memory. We are talking like 40% drop in ASPs, like in average selling prices. So this is significant, and this also goes, of course, to the bottom line of Samsung. So there will be a huge impact comparing to the last 2 years, where, for example, they enjoyed higher average selling prices, but stable costs, or maybe a little bit higher costs, so the profitability was very, very good. So now when you look at TSMC basically last year they announced they will raise prices to their customers, right? Because they want to make sure, they want to lock in into long-term agreements to make sure more stable for them. And for Fab, it's very important, Konrad, you agree with me, to have like the stable output, right? And not just say, oh, this quarter I want to take 10,000 wafer and then next quarter, no. So they want to have this continuity, and the shortages have helped a lot of the foundries to get more stability in there.
But for Samsung, what is the cause of the volatility? Is it because they rely on, say, PCs, memory is directly linked to consumer?
No, but I think you look for Samsung, it's one commodity. So if semiconductor, you can say 1/3 is logic, right? It's like CPUs, processors, this. The other third is basically memory. Now you need to understand that TSMC is not producing a single piece of memory which you sell as a loose component, right? They are using SRAMs on the wafers or different type of new memory technologies, but it's more than basically on system, on chip, or on wafer level, but not as components. Where Samsung, a big portion of their revenue is basically DRAM and NAND flash. They are the market leader in both segments by far, right? So you can say if this market is good for them, the memory, it will be very challenging for TSMC to be better in profitability. But if this is a weak year, there's a good chance for TSMC to be better in profitability.
I see. So there's some promises for TSMC to surpass. There's some promises there.
Right.
Now, we just talked about the competitiveness of TSMC and how it is on track to become the world's most profitable semiconductor foundries. Coming on next, we hear from Karl Breidenbach, global leader of the semiconductor procurement practice at Boston Consulting Group, as he speaks to Rath about global semiconductor industry trends and what to focus on in 2023.
Welcome back to the show. Let's now hear from Karl Breidenbach, global leader of the semiconductor procurement practice at Boston Consulting Group. He spoke to me about how the rising investments in the global semiconductor industry and how demand in different products will pan out and the key role that Taiwanese chip makers will continue to play. Let's take a look.
It's been a wild ride in 2022. 2023 will be a change. So what we see, the semiconductor supply shortage is going to ease in 2023. However, there's also large uncertainty on add-on capacity, especially when we look at the mature nodes. What we've done in the last couple of weeks, we tried to model potential outcomes on how the capacity could pan out for 23 and beyond. And what you see here, there are a couple of structural trends in the industry. On the one hand, you see the consumer sector, such as PC, notebook shipments going south in a dramatic way. So we've seen double-digit declines towards the 20s of demand going down. And this is certainly the biggest consumption of semiconductor capacity. On the other hand, what we are still seeing that in other segments, such as automotive, the demand is still robust because there is still a lot of demand there that could not be fulfilled in the past. And the companies are now working on that demand, on bringing out the new cars to the customers. There are a lot of investments ongoing in the industry. On the other hand, we see the friction in the U.S. China trade war, which is kind of inhibiting that trend. And more specifically, if you look into the various kinds of semiconductors, we've looked into logic, MEMS, analog, memory, discrete, and opto. They're quite big differences. So on the one hand, what we see, there will be shortages that are still expected to amplify in selected areas, such as I said, automotive, due to limited capex on mature nodes, as well as analog and power fabs are still quite full. They're running at above 90% capacity, while on the other hand, we see the cyclical drop that is leading to a reduction in logic capacity, in memories, as well as in optoelectronics. However, we see also increasing uncertainty and inventory corrections visible when you look into the leading edge side. And the leading edge side, as you know, is the most capex intensive part of the industry, where the big players like TSMC and Intel and Samsung are currently investing.
In terms of leading edge technology, what role do you see Taiwan play going forward? As Taiwan is also a major producer of PCs, you mentioned decreased demand for that. But are there also big opportunities for Taiwan, such as in automotive, as we've seen earlier during the COVID pandemic, where German automakers were relying on Taiwan?
Taiwan has the prime role when it comes to leading edge semiconductors. Leading edge semiconductors, I would denominate everything below 10 nanometers. And here the majority of the world's capacity lies in Taiwan. And the big consumer OEMs are heavily relying on that. And now what we see, automotive companies are jumping on the bandwagon because they are moving into areas like central car computing, where you need the high performance computing capabilities. And here, Taiwan, and especially some companies like TSMC, have a leading role because they are the first ones that can create automotive-grade technology on the leading edge, while others are still about to follow. And when I speak about the others, obviously I'm speaking about Samsung Semiconductor and Intel. All of them would like to have a pie of the market. On the other hand, when you look into mature capacity, and mature capacities are super interesting because this is the bread and butter business of a lot of the European IDMs as well as the European automotive and industrial companies. And here we're not speaking about 40 nanometers, not even about 65 nanometers. In a lot of cases, we're still speaking about 130 and higher. I see Taiwan having good and attractive foundry players such as Vanguard Semiconductor who are investing into that area. Nevertheless, I see Taiwan also in the mature capacity area playing a significant role, as other industries and other companies are going to need these technologies for a long time.
You just heard the global leader of semiconductor procurement at Boston Consulting Group to share with Rath the global semiconductor outlook and the indispensable role of Taiwan semiconductors. With the expected increasing investments in the chip industry, now let's discuss that intensifying competition. Konrad, my question is prime role. That's Breidenbach's word for describing Taiwan. And it's very interesting because TSMC's chair, Mark Liu, just said that there will be a 2 nanometers fab in Taichung and Hsinchu, that's in Taiwan, very important. But if you put it into the context between US and China's competition, now my question is how can Taiwan collaborate with US more to invent or create a new system for chip supply chain? Do you think that's possible?
Yes. Well, from starting of TSMC, TSMC has been working with the US industry very closely. I think roughly 70%, right now maybe a little bit higher, of revenue coming from US company. The big guy, Apple, Qualcomm, NVIDIA, AMD, and so on. And it has been dominating customer, the top 5 customer all coming from US. Only a very short period of time, roughly about 2015 to 2020, before the pandemic, before the U.S. China conflict, there's a rising of China demand, okay, going to roughly about 10-20%, especially Huawei and HiSilicon. But it was quickly shut down by U.S. government policy. So it's a very short time spike demand from China. So I think your question is really TSMC has been a primary supplier for U.S. chips, especially the logic chips. But TSMC doesn't make memory, and so it just continued to be a supply. But whether it's manufacturing in Taiwan or manufacturing in U.S. is a different story.
Yeah.
Okay? It doesn't change anything about its demand coming from U.S. U.S. manufacturing is what I guess is U.S. government want to do, because manufacturing does play a very important role of a whole country. But honestly speaking, U.S. manufacturing is not that easy. It has a cultural issue for that. So TSMC, I guess what TSMC is going to U.S. Partially for risk management, because if you have all the world supplier in a very small island of Taiwan, it creates certain kind of risk for everybody, especially for U.S. So having a U.S. manufacturing is, to my opinion, is mainly for risk management.
So it's just one hedging strategy. Do you feel that TSMC will also, say, follow U.S. makers to Southeast Asia or other locations outside of China in that respect?
I think today there are very, very few locations could make the so-called high-end chips.
They talk about India a lot. Do you feel that it could go there?
I think India will have a long, long time to go.
What is the restriction to have such kind of installment?
It's really a culture. It's really a culture. In India, going to this high-tech area, mainly coming from the software view. And maybe they do have a market, certain market just rising up. I think Indians' culture is not like Taiwan. Taiwan in general are very obedient. They are hardworking. They follow the order, follow SOP much better than many other places in any other place in the world.
And wages are competitive in Taiwan.
Which is a very important factor for making many semiconductor manufacturing. I don't think China has it. Okay, honestly speaking, China has been going to this application because they have a lot of people. So the domestic market is so huge. So the software application, the Alibaba, Tencent, and then so on.
Software platforms.
Software company, they can do it very well. Many software company can do it well. Doing semiconductor is not very good. It's not very attractive for the China people, China worker, okay? Because it's hardworking, less salary, less profit. One of the interesting things I observe in China is most of people going to the top school semiconductor area, they are not going to the semiconductor industry.
So
after
still go
graduate.
to software companies?
They either go to software or finance, okay? Banking.
That's interesting.
That's where the money is, okay? For every talent, you want to get as much salary as possible, as money as possible. But semiconductor is not an easy place to get the money in China. It's probably get the best salary in Taiwan. So Taiwan is very unique in terms of salary position across the whole industry.
So Marco, how much impact do you feel this has on China? As Konrad mentioned, that to them it's actually not the hottest industry. Do you feel
talents choosing for their career path?
Well, I think that China has to cope at the moment with several headwinds, right? Because as Konrad mentioned, there were rising orders basically coming to TSMC, where high silicon Huawei probably was accounting for 15 to 20% of the revenue. This vaporized. This basically is gone. But interesting enough, Apple came just right in during that time and sucked up the capacity, right? So you didn't really see a huge dip at TSMC when this basically happened, because Apple came and moved the production then there. So they have been before with Samsung, and then they move more and more to TSMC. And so for high silicon or Huawei, they need to look now within their own supply chain, which has been getting more and more challenging the last few years, because we are not talking only that you cannot make cutting edge production here for limited companies, but you will also be constrained because of semiconductor equipment you don't get, you don't get the support anymore. And for semiconductor is very, very challenging, you know, to build up an ecosystem, because it's very collaborative.
And you mean support, is that support from, say, U.S. technology?
Of course, yes, everybody. Also TSMC. TSMC needs support from European companies. ASML is the most important company for EUV technology. This is how you can make small process nodes. Without this machine, TSMC also could not produce, right?
Well, you've built in such ecosystems so challenging. How come after COVID particularly, so many countries want to localize their supply chain? And how they're going to succeed in this goal?
Let me just to add to what Konrad mentioned regarding the US. If you look at the US was always kind of the leader in technology, which came out of the military. So if you think about, for example, the internet, if you think about GPS systems,
that's all from
all came basically first in the defense industry and then coming into consumer. Now we have the other way around. And I think that's where basically the US has this identified as national security, and they want to have like a viable production capability, at least to have factories there, to do something also within USA. Because let's be honest, I think the factories what are built up in the USA comparing to the output what TSMC is doing in Taiwan is pretty small, right? It's still significant if you have a TSMC fab in any location, like in Germany they want to do a fab now, in USA they have a fab. So you have, for certain market segments, you will be able to tailor capacity. Like TSMC in the US is more in the cutting edge technology, let's say like 5 nanometer, what they will do probably even 3 nanometer. But in Europe, it's probably only 2x. It's maybe only 28 nanometers or 20 nanometer, which is for the automotive industry, like MCUs. So I think it's a way that for TSMC, they can basically expand to other regions without giving up the advantage what Taiwan has, because the advantage what Taiwan has is the ecosystem. It's not only the fab. No country in the world, including Korea, has this system. Nobody. So you sooner or later, you need to go to one company in the supply chain will be based in Taiwan or will be a Taiwanese company if you want to make a semiconductor, especially if you look for the newest technology.
Karl also mentioned earlier that European car makers will rely on TSMC for that, and that Intel and these other companies do not have the current capacity to replace TSMC. How do you see TSMC's role in Europe for the next year?
Let me put this in
the next 2 years, for this year and next year.
Let me put it in current perspective. The revenue of automotive for TSMC is at the moment 5%.
Okay.
5%. So 95% is other business. So of course there's some volatility right now in the smartphone business where TSMC is building a lot. But in reality, 5% is automotive at the moment. This will grow. And I think that's also potentially the move why TSMC is moving to Germany, because there's a big automotive industry. And Reuters also reported about NXP, Bosch, and Infineon want to utilize this fab for their production. So again, it's a pure play foundry. What they offer is manufacturing capability or capacity. And that's also very welcome in Europe to support the local automotive industry. So I'm sure that a Bosch, NXP, Infineon need to give commitments to TSMC, which is good for TSMC as a pure manufacturer. They know, hey, my customers are basically producing, so I don't need to worry. My capacity, is like, they handle the forecast, not me, because I handle just the manufacturing. But in terms of to fill the manufacturing side, to make it profitable, this is basically balanced then to kind of the design houses or to the IDMs who have a hybrid model.
For our international audience, can you talk a bit about the new fab in Germany that TSMC is building? Will this be more on advanced high-end chips, or is it all across the board?
No, as I mentioned, it will be more like matured chips, right? So that's basically what has been released in the press is about. They will go into the 20 nanometer, 28 nanometer, and it's very interesting because I had some discussion with people on LinkedIn, and they said, "Oh, the government should not give subsidies, to TSMC when they come. Why would you do this? You would harm the industry in Europe because we have our own players." But people don't understand the bigger picture, because these companies who are producing for the automotive industry, the demand will grow exponentially, right? So we need much more chips, much more MCUs.
As you mentioned, collaboration.
Right. So the collaboration is there. So these companies will cooperate with TSMC, which is good for Taiwan because TSMC is a Taiwanese company. They have stronger collaboration. So they not only have the collaboration on site on the island, they also have the collaboration in their most important markets.
So it's more like following
Europe
customers.
and USA.
Yes. Konrad, let's circle back to Asia a little bit. As Marco just mentioned, no other country in the world right now has such ecosystem. That's our most vantage point right now. But Samsung will argue they're trying to catching up. They're trying to build their own ecosystem right now, and a lot of international media have portrayed this way. From your point of view, how many years do we have?
Ecosystem is a very interesting thing. If you go back to the word, the meaning of ecosystem, it kind of naturally coming from the echo and the system point of view. Everybody kind of put things together naturally into a huge ecosystem. The ecosystem was originally built in U.S. And then especially earlier days, Japan also participated. If you look at all the material, all the equipment company, they are mainly from US and then Japan, and a little bit in Europe, like SML, for example, and a few companies. Taiwan really doesn't have that part of ecosystem. Okay. The equipment, everything coming from Taiwan. Taiwan has a supporting system using whatever existing things coming from US, Japan, and other places. And the ecosystem is not just the equipment supplier, the hardware part or the material part. It's also a supporting part. Somehow, Taiwan spent roughly about 30 years to build that supporting system. So ecosystem, not only the physical part, but also the service part of it.
Yeah.
Okay, and then maybe surrounding essentially by TSMC. That's very important. So U.S. control certain things. For example, if the so-called entity list apply to TSMC, TSMC will be dead also because you don't have equipment also. Right. That's what China semiconductor facing today, the most difficult part. But because U.S. and then Taiwan are ally, we kind of cooperate together. So in general, I think U.S. and Japan will not limit that import to Taiwan. So Taiwan with its own ecosystem built in 30 years, and then together to build I think it's the most powerful ecosystem in Taiwan, particularly in Taiwan. This ecosystem is very hard to migrate to different places. Give you an example. If this ecosystem move to U.S. in Arizona, it will not happen very easily. Okay, especially the service part of it.
Yeah.
Okay, you have a physical part is not a problem, but the service part, mentality.
Client relations.
For example, TSMC when they are on call in the midnight, actually all the ecosystem are put on call to support. I don't think U.S. Service can support that way because this is not their working culture, their labor culture.
It's not.
But Konrad, if you look at Japan,
labor culture is very
Japan and South Korea.
Japan is also very.
Well, I don't think Japan today can do that anymore. Okay, they might do it.
The government's putting in money and all.
Maybe 30 years ago or 20 years ago they can do that. The young generation, the Gen Z people doesn't want to do that.
Oh, we still have Gen Z in Taiwan as well.
But somehow Gen Z people in Taiwan are still very follow the order. They are willing to work hard for the money. Okay, so it's a very strange culture. Okay, that's very unusual culture in Taiwan.
Which is a very good thing in a very
good way. It's a very good thing for the semiconductor
industry.
Yeah. But may not be very good thing for the people. But anyway, but it's different story.
Yeah.
So this kind of ecosystem, I think Korea is very hard to build. Okay, partially because Korea start with the memory. Again, memory is a dominant revenue for a long time. If you look at Samsung's every year, their revenue up and down, or they mainly caused by memory up and down. Okay. The logic part is actually, I consider a small part, okay? But TSMC is mainly a logic part. And logic part is a variety of application. We have hundreds of customers, just like what Marco just mentioned. If the one customer disappear, the other customer will come in. The cell phone is not good, the other customer may come in. It's very hard for everybody become very bad. Okay, 2009, we do face a particular time in 2009, the financial crisis, having a problem. But since then, TSMC never experienced that kind of even like a high silicon gone, and there are people coming to fill the capacity. So the capacity stability is very unusual. It's only for the so-called pure foundry you can do. If you are a product company, you cannot do that because every product has its cycle, has its difficult. So if you are a product company, unless you have hundreds of products and you can change whatever the demand kind of things, but it's not very easy. There's no such a company in the world.
I see.
Intel is only CPU mainly. Okay, Samsung is mainly memory. So when you are in the IDM company, the cycle is very, very volatile. Okay.
Or TSMC is stable.
So TSMC in general, I think is the most stable supplier in semiconductor company.
That's such a key message that we've discussed so far. Now we talked about the intensifying semiconductor industry competition and the key advantage, well, very stable, Taiwan has in catering rising demand in certain sectors. Coming up next, we'll hear from Colley Hwang, president and founder of DIGITIMES, the leading source for the latest news and trends on semiconductors, as he speaks to Rath on why Taiwan's semiconductor advantage is second to none.
Welcome back to the show. Let's now hear from Colley Hwang, president and founder of DIGITIMES, one of the world's most trusted sources on semiconductor and technology supply chains based out of Taiwan. He spoke to me in an exclusive interview about Taiwan's complete semiconductor ecosystem and why the TSMC Arizona plant will not diminish Taiwan's competitive advantage. Let's take a look.
Taiwan is very small island. So because land is limited, so our factories, mostly, they are compact factory. So easy for us to communicate. So you know that 90% of the high-tech companies, their headquarters located in Taipei in the Hsinchu area. There is 1 hour distance. It's also easy for us to communicate. We are classmates or good friends for as long as 30 years.
Less than a 1 hour drive.
Yeah, yes, the 1 hour drive. It's very, very easy for us to, and as you know, in 1970s and 1980s, most of the young talents of Taiwan, they studied in the STEM, science, technology, and the like engineering or mathematics. So that is good for companies like TSMC, UMC. They recruit more young men, more young talents work for them. Taiwan is small. Looks like that is a disadvantage of Taiwan, but actually there is an advantage of Taiwan.
We're saying other countries, say in Japan, they're all scattered. Or saying the U.S. is a huge country.
Yes,
it's hard to communicate. And all.
Compared with Taiwan, they are scattered. So looks like the disadvantage, as I say. But today, improve. Yeah, and there is a good advantage for us. So, I teach in some universities. So it's possible for me. I teach in Taiwan University, Jiaotong University, Tsinghua University. In those of family university, easy for us to contact with us because 1 hour driving distance. So there's a good things for Taiwan too.
How does that compare with what TSMC is building in Arizona? Are they trying to build a mini ecosystem that replicates what Taiwan has?
Today, as I know, 93% of the TSMC capacity still keep in Taiwan. And I believe 3 years later, the percentage will reduce to 88% about. But in case of for long term, maybe year 2030, I believe Taiwan still can keep at least 80%. So which means we have the R&D manpower, experience, and the whole system. I believe they will still keep in Taiwan because of efficiency. Not the reason for American government wants or Japanese government wants. There is different things because efficiency-wise, we need to take this way. And I personally believe we need to invite more international talents come to Taiwan, work with us.
As we've seen with ASML, with their new
we have 500 TSMC talents go to Arizona for manufacturing. But you may didn't know, more than 200 from Japan to come to Taiwan. They learn Taiwan how to produce, how to do foundry. So there's tools now in Taichung, as I know.
So you don't believe 20% going out of Taiwan will lessen Taiwan's competitive advantage in any way?
I can predict at least 10 years. We don't have any worry.
You just heard Colley Hwang on Taiwan's robust semiconductor ecosystem, the increasing foundry talent flowing into Taiwan, and why TSMC's new Arizona plant will not diminish its global edge. Now, let's discuss some of these advantages and how that has made it a vital player in the U.S.-led tech supply chain. Marco, I want to talk about Hong Kong a little bit more because right now it's, used to be a financial and tech, if you may, hub for Asia, but right now it's under the new law. I would just put it that way. And so we can see NVIDIA and AMD both moving their warehouse to Taiwan. In your opinion, what does that mean for the ecosystem as a whole?
Okay, so you say we are talking now about warehouses moving comparing to high-end foundry fabs.
Yes.
So let's put it this way. I have never seen Hong Kong and will never see Hong Kong quite vital for the semiconductor industry.
You've never seen it, right?
No,
it's never.
But for logistic-wise, right? So this was kind before like the gate into China, right? So this was many, many years they were riding this wave. They had opportunities there. The finance community was there. And I think a lot of the companies, especially during COVID, and how the situation has been evolved there, they were deciding then also to move out. So financial people go to Singapore and to Taipei. Logistics, if it's like tech, semiconductor, there's a lot of companies coming to Taiwan. I would not see this as something that Hong Kong is losing something very critical. So I think it was
you don't
probably
see it that way.
No, because it's kind of something. Konrad, I'm not sure.
It was never there.
It's not really there, right? So it's not because it's small from the place. It's never invested really so much there, and I would not see there also for the future that there's a vital role, right? That would change a lot of things.
But is it an opportunity for Taiwan?
Yeah.
As Catherine mentioned,
I think definitely. I know friends. They come from, for example, also from the finance industry. They moved to Taipei, right? A lot of companies who are from the VC space, venture capital companies, startup companies. I think Taiwan is doing a very good job to support that ecosystem. I've seen this especially in the last 3 years. So I have brought also some startup companies from Germany here to Taiwan, where the government basically make programs to give awards when you go in certain industry segments which are strategical for Taiwan, right? Technology and this area. So you nurture an ecosystem which maybe will be the next big hit for technology, not only the manufacturing, but you also look to find products, services, software, what Konrad mentioned, where USA or China is strong, to also develop something here in Taiwan.
But I'm very curious, such movement or investment, if you call it, moving to Taiwan, do you think it's an extension for U.S. China tech war, or it's a pure business decision?
Well, I think this is a little bit correlated, I would say, because you need to look, especially now looking forward with all the sanctions and the restrictions. As a company, you need to make sure that you have like supply chains and supply chain stability, right? So I mentioned before that I'm under the strong impression that looking forward, we will have 2 different supply chains in the future. Right? So you will have supply chains which are more tailored through the Western world, and you will have supply chains for China, right? So you will have certain industries, certain segments where you need to have 2 streams if you support both areas. So if you basically shipping goods into China and you're shipping goods into the Western world, I don't think that you have the benefit anymore that you can combine these supply chains. And I think that's also something what Maurice Zheng from TSMC mentioned. He normally said decoupling is not possible. And if it is possible, it will cost a lot. And people need to understand this. You need to pay somewhere the price, and you probably also need to sit back and maybe distinguish about what should be national security and what should be like common product, right? With semiconductor is quite difficult if you look into CPUs or processing computing power, because you can use it in both ways. And that's, I think, also why you see this trend that companies are trying to move out of China supply chains. Today I was reading Dell want to make in the next couple of years all their products manufactured and the components without China products. I think it's very ambitious, frankly speaking. It's very ambitious to do this because you have different quality level of products. And for myself, I consider Taiwan more on the higher end of the value chain, right? So this means the majority right now in the process nodes is, let's say, sub 10 nanometer, if you look at the volumes, right? What is being done and also the revenue. But of course, the US government cutting all the equipment manufacturers to move to China. What you will see there is they will be more strong in the, how you say this, in the daily life semiconductors, which is used where you don't need to have these process nodes like the most advanced one, because this is the one what they probably can scale still, but they cannot move, at least at the moment, to go into the cutting edge technology.
So more on the lower end that's not related to national security or military.
Yes. So that's how I would see it. But if you look, for example, also let's say in defense, you have also legacy components which are used. But when you know artificial intelligence like AI, so this you normally need computing power, right? So there you need, this is the processor, this is the the bread and butter, you can say, from TSMC. This is where TSMC is most advanced, where they are supplying to the Apples their chips, to the AMDs, the NVIDIAs, like cutting-edge processor technology to have maximum amount of data processed, analyzed, and that's basically why USA cut this off to give the support to China.
Speaking of the USA, Konrad, let's go back to the U.S. CHIPS Act, where, as Marco mentioned, there's this ban of technology going to China from the U.S. How do you feel, as an ally of the U.S., Taiwan, or aka TSMC, will benefit or actually contribute to the U.S. new supply chain?
Well, actually, I think from TSMC point of view, any restriction are bad, okay? Because China is a big market. Force TSMC not to be able to explore big
and choose sides.
But they don't have a choice because you know, pretty much everything's controlled by US today. So it's just how to minimize the impact. Okay, minimize the loss. I call it loss of China market.
Okay.
China market is an interesting market. If you coming from the previous few years ago, it was probably the highest growth rate market because it have nothing initially, and you need a lot of it has a population, so many people need a product with a semiconductor to enable it. So that's why I call it China market. If you talk about the supply chain, originally China is the so-called war factory. They make everything for everybody, okay, including U.S. market, including Western market. I think the supply to the Western market maybe only left is the cheapest market, okay, but
for
the
Walmart.
higher end Walmart and the higher end market will probably gone.
So in terms of cost-benefit analysis, which do you think TSMC has more to gain? Building these new factories, as you see fabs in Arizona, and following U.S. customers to its new supply chains, or the loss of the China market?
The cost point of view, I think for US TSMC, the capacity is designed as long as it's full. They don't really care whether it's a US market or China market. So TSMC, when they build a capacity, they have a very detailed plan how to build that. Okay, they just want to make sure when they build that plan, it will be full for a long time. Okay, TSMC, majority of TSMC, even back to the original 6-inch fab, 8-inch fab, they are still full. Okay, they do not overbuild that capacity when the downturn comes.